Yep.
Hey.
Here we go. Once again, New York City.
We don't,
New York City.
We don't say it like that.
It's too humid. It's too humid in North Carolina. It is not too humid in North Carolina this time of year.
I said heat and humidity. I didn't even say what specific state. Did I?
They're there.
All I said
she was saying here. You were insinuating you would never move there because of the heat.
Well,
because
there's a whole
New York
host of reasons why
so
I would
much
never move there.
Better.
But
okay, so
but
we're
I was
back.
referring to Alaska.
We're back
as I
to
clarified.
Verbum, and we're going way up north to Alaska.
To Alaska.
So Alaska is like where you would call home.
I don't have a home. I'm a citizen of the world.
So you really, there's no place that you like. This is home.
The closest thing to what I consider home is the Lower East Side of New York City. And I lived there from 6 years old to 13.
So when you go there, that's home.
I don't go there.
Well, okay, that is home.
I haven't been to New York. I went 4 years ago. And
did you go down to the area?
Well, I went there specifically to take photos for the memoir. And it was in fact, I was crying because I was real-time writing. And our block was intact. It was desolate. Some buildings have been torn down, and there were parking lots. And the building that the co-op extension that they built, which was supposed to be the reason why we were being moved, was there, and there's a wall around it. So I called that piece Gaza, because it's a wall around it. The police station's still there, the pizza shop's still there, the fire station's still there, but everything's bricked up.
So what does it feel like? It's interesting because a lot of people, they grow up someplace, they go home and like that's home, and you're saying like I really don't have a home, and then you go back and you see something that's like completely not what home was, but there's remnants of home.
I cried.
You cried?
Well, I tell you the reason I cried wasn't so much that I was home, but if I had gone back and there were apartments there and landscaping and energy and life, I would have felt a little sadness, but I would have said, at least it looks good.
Looks good, but maybe more longing than
right,
loss.
but to have vacant buildings and it was like a ghost town, and then the one building to literally have a wall around it, which separates it from the rest of the community, right? And so I cried. And what's ironic about it is, I went there, took the pictures, I was writing real time, like, oh, there's the hill. I took all these pictures, and then I lost the pictures, but my computer died. There's still some question whether it can be found somewhere. But, okay, I said, well, that was 2 years ago. All right, so I'll make the trek back and retake the photos. The writing's done, but retake the photos. Don't you know, less than, 2 months ago, because I joined a group on Facebook, the Lower East Side group, they started demolition to start building. 46 years later. 46, and they said,
why did you go take pictures of
and they said, this is what they said. They said that, which was the promise they made way back then, 46 years ago, you'll have first dibs coming back. So they're saying you can have first dibs coming back if you lived here, but you have to have original documentation that you did.
Okay. Well, I mean, most of us have stuff from 46 years ago just laying around. So, yeah, it's just, it's
like
right there.
My deceased mother's lease from an apartment we lived in back in the 1960s.
So that makes sense. That makes sense, and that's good. So what the story or lesson we should take from this is, whenever the government tells you that you can have something, it's going to happen. It's going to happen that way, and you just might have to wait 46 years.
So I'm on the mailing list, but go ahead. So
it's interesting because there's a couple things here. Because tonight we're going to be talking about knowing your trusted source, right? And a lot of people are going to look to home and an experience to know those. But there's another thing, and you gave me an article about, and I cannot remember the word.
Was it domicile?
Domicile.
It was
the domicile.
Tied to what happened to my neighborhood.
And I don't think that was a unique perspective that I never really thought about, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, which is domicile for people where their home is taken from them. And we hear about it a lot these days with, maybe it'll make the news because they want to put a new road. and they need to take somebody's house, or they want to put up a new Walmart, so they take somebody's house, and it
Or
says,
better still, gentrification.
right, well, the whole, that's something I don't completely understand. I mean,
That's domicile.
It is, but it's also a weird thing. It's like, don't come in this area.
But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying,
Well, let's finish domicide though, then come to
but
back.
But that is domicile.
Well, let's come back. So domicide, just so people can kind of get it, because we typically, the news today would kind of put that out as that eminent domain kind of argument, right? And that's when somebody's house is being taken. But what we're talking, that's domicide. So
domicide is really the murder of one's home. That's what domicide is. It's the murder of one's home, however that happens. So
when you say domicide, in the media, we'll often see those as eminent domains, and everybody will sit there and say, but it's better for the public good that your house is taken and destroyed. And in the article you gave me, it actually shared with, what was a fictitious story, but it had a basis in reality, of a man who was so bent on hurting his wife even after they got married that he went and destroyed the entire house.
Right.
Because in destroying the house, he knew that just destroyed something within her that she could never get back, and it was the home.
Well, that's what my ex-husband did. He said, I'm not going to sign papers for us to sell the house. You want a divorce? Therefore, the house goes into foreclosure.
Okay.
And that's what happened.
Is that the same thing? You would look at that. That's a little bit different,
How?
right? Because you guys entered into an agreement to be married, right, with the idea that it was kind of forever. And then since that agreement didn't hold up, then the stuff that you built together is going to have much more difficulty holding up.
Well, no, because, he said, you're the one that wanted the house. Now you want a divorce. You want to sell the house.
Yeah, well.
Therefore, I will not agree to sell the house. And I don't care if it goes into foreclosure.
Next time, don't marry him.
I won't.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
just next time.
I'm just saying that's domicile.
But it is,
it's the
so
same thing.
It's and I get it. There's varying degrees that we're talking about, but that's domicide. And then you came in and you now are talking about
gentrification.
Gentrification. Explain gentrification, because I don't think I quite get it. I don't think I get the perspective as to why it's so
reviled.
Yeah.
Because my neighborhood is a perfect example. The neighborhood I lived in was a vibrant neighborhood. It was working poor.
Okay.
There were people in that neighborhood who actually owned businesses in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So we had 2 bodegas. Mm-hmm. The guys that owned those bodegas lived in that neighborhood.
Okay.
We played with their kids. We were all on a first name basis. The police station was on the corner. Everyone knew the police. The police had the PAL.
Okay.
So they were part of our community. Okay. The fire station was around the corner. Everyone knew the fire.
Right, so it was like Mayberry is a borough.
There's no such thing as Mayberry in New York City.
Well, but
it was a neighborhood. It was.
For the people who in the world who don't understand what it's, I had a guy here come in here the other night, and I'm like, so what do you guys think? I really like it. I'm like, are you okay? He says, I'm worried my car's gonna get broken into. I'm like, I don't worry about that. Right, but he came from Mayberry, USA. So for him to come into this part of Rochester scared him. But
people break into cars. People break into cars in Mayberry. They just say, "Oh, Johnny's just being Peck's bad boy, and he'll outgrow it."
Right. So there is Mayberry. So Mayberry is a little bit different for everybody. Mayberry is home for a moment. I'm just kind of creating a.
Well, let's just say we can call it a. If you're not from New York City, you may not understand what a neighborhood is, but essentially it was our block, okay? It was like 2 blocks.
And everybody knew each other?
All the kids went to the same school. The business was there. People were working. Everyone knew everyone. We had services in our
Everybody
community.
loved each other, and in came this gentrification giant.
No.
What happened?
One day, we got a letter.
Okay.
Everybody got a letter and said, this neighborhood's going to be torn down.
By the way, what time are we at?
We were at 7-Eleven.
Oh, okay. We'll have to go to break here shortly, but
This this neighborhood's going to be torn down. You have two choices. You can move into public housing or the projects, or you can take $100 per room. And whatever the new housing that's going to be built, which was supposed to be co-ops, you have first dibs coming in.
And 46 years later.
But the point is, it was not a community, it was a working poor neighborhood. So it wasn't even realistic to say you'll have first dibs to move in, because it wasn't moderate income housing.
So now, is that gentrification?
So those people who lived in that neighborhood literally were pushed out of their community.
Okay.
Not a community that had burned out buildings, that had vacant parking lots, that was riddled with crime and drugs.
And they were doing this, and we're going to go to a break here, but they were doing this because they were going to put in nicer apartments for everybody.
Right.
And they were going to improve the standard of living for the people who are already living there.
No, for the people that own the co-ops across the street.
Oh, for the ones who own the co-ops.
Because it was going to be an
street.
extension of the co-ops.
Let's go to a break here.
How long? 1 minute?
I don't. Yeah, go to 1 minute.
You sure?
Yeah. Yeah. So
there are different ways that gentrification can happen. My cousin, for example, she bought a house in Brooklyn, and what they do sometimes is that you slowly begin to take services away from a neighborhood.
Okay.
So you lose the supermarket. They don't do anything about crime. They're not picking up the garbage. But then, as the houses, because services are lost, people begin to move out.
Now, this is happening in the poor neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Right, the poor neighborhoods, and somehow it's supposed to be good and helpful.
It goes back to your argument about if we weren't giving everyone $15 an hour, because we give $15 an hour, people understand that eliminates lifting everything up. So this argument that you're gonna. So what ended up to those families, the ones that chose to go into projects, right? They end up in projects where there's 10 bazillion people, right? Crime, urine in the hallways, all that stuff. And my mother opted not to do that. She said, I'm never gonna, I'm not taking my kid into the projects. So we moved to Brooklyn. She took the $100 per room, and we moved to Brooklyn, to no man's land.
So gentrification is more or less the takeover of people's homes, right? So going to the domicile side, or area of home.
It's not even
as a means of upgrading it.
That's what they say, yeah.
That's what they say.
But essentially it's destruction of a neighborhood, and then you rebuild that neighborhood.
So like when a Walmart wants to come into an area and they want to do all these things, and they start talking, because in Rochester there was one of the areas somebody was talking about buying something, and they're like, it wasn't Hearts, but somebody was talking about it, and they're like, well, that's just, now you have wealthy whites investing into this community, which is dominantly African American, and they're like, that's gentrification. And I look at that going, okay, I see that it is the word gentrification, but is it the action?
Well,
Because you've got like the apartments that are over by the cafe there.
Well, I can give you another example
Susan B. Anthony
here
Street
locally. I don't know what the name of what that development was on the other side of Ford Street. There used to be
like Genesee Gateway or something that was over there.
Right.
That's a good example.
They completely tore that down. So you have to say, where did all those people go?
Well, they didn't tear it down. They just kind of remodeled it.
No, they tore it down and then they rebuilt something
so
that
all
those
of
people could
I
not
thought
move
that those
into.
were also, what do you want to call it, subsidized housing.
The new ones?
Yeah.
No, that's high luxury apartments over there.
Those are luxury apartments in Rochester?
Those painted, odd-looking things. But the point,
The point's not that, but yeah.
The point I'm trying to
I
make
just had a little revelation
is that
there.
if you take an entire community
Yep.
and uproot it
Displace them.
and displace those people, where do they go?
It's sort of the domicile effect, if you will, of an entire neighborhood.
Because they can never really realistically come back because you're not building housing that they can afford to move into.
So now let's bring this whole conversation back to the whole trusted source
Okay.
idea. And why I wanted to get this idea of knowing your trusted source. And yeah, it did begin with a conversation online of, people just saying, well, this is, they're so convinced of their opinion. It was the $15 an hour conversation. And like, where are you getting your information from? And one of the things that we have to recognize as a community, that our trusted sources, what we really look to in our life, that we're willing to kind of stake beliefs on, comes somewhere from that thing we call home. The things that we hold most dear are those ones that reach way back as deep as we can and say, there was this moment that was good, there was this moment that was good. And as the deeper and deeper and deeper those roots can get, the stronger they are. So like our trusted sources, we can try to trace those back. But with what we're doing in our communities, no roots are ever allowed to actually set in.
Well, I'm a gypsy, so I don't get it anyway.
Yeah, no, you have no.
I have no idea how someone lives somewhere forever.
Which is a great conversation. Then to switch a little bit on this whole trusted source idea. Let's kind of get into a little bit. We're going to go a little bit backwards today, and
we talked a little about that. That was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and if you will, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the whole idea of what is the information that you trust? Huh? Okay, what is the information you trust, and why do you trust it? And we can bring it certainly back to the $15 an hour minimum wage thing, just so we can kind of touch on it but not make it particular.
Yeah.
But really to understand, is it mom? Is it dad? Because my parents didn't teach me about economics. Now I learned it in the future, but that kind of thing. So when we come back, we'll explore really to knowing your trusted root, and we'll do a 2-minute break. And for those of you who missed Mark earlier, we'll go to a Mark break, a 2-minute Mark break coming up.
You gotta buy me 20 seconds.
And I have to come up with 20 seconds. So the information that Mark has here is really good. It's the whole idea of acknowledging where you're using your time. What?
Is Mike hot?
Mike? Yeah, it's good right now. It's still on, and it won't. Yeah, he'll keep it on here for a moment, and you'll see it. But good information. Watch what Mark has to say here.
I need to know when the mic's hot.
Well, hello there. My name is Mark Delaney. I'm the head coach at ChampionsUniversity.com. I want to talk to you today about your time. It is, without question, your most important asset to creating the business you want to create. I'm a person who's fascinated by outer space. Those images, they drive me crazy. I put them in a lot of my videos. But if you travel from one planet to another, it's a long, long journey. One star to another, it's even further. But what fills the space between stars is called dark matter and dark energy. To a lot of people, it's nothing. It's nothing there. But do you know the same is true of your journey from where you are to the level of success you want to create? Do you know what that's filled with? It's filled with wasted time, wasted opportunities, wasted chances to ask for what you want, wasted chances to meet someone new. Because of how you use your time will determine how fast you get to where you want to be. Much, much more than your talent, your skills, your knowledge, the quality of your product. It's about time. In the next session, I'm going to give you a tip to help you better use your time. But for now, I need you to understand that the journey to success is filled with wasted time. Eliminate your wasted time and you will get to where you want to be faster. At ChampionsUniversity.com, we've created several ways to help you use your time to get what you want in the quickest, easiest, simplest, and least expensive manner. If we can be of service, use the contact information below to give us a call or contact us in any way you feel. I want to help you use your time to get everything you want. Again, this is Mark Delaney. I'm the head coach at ChampionsUniversity.com, and I hope to get a chance to help you grow your business.
Results will tell. So, here we go. We're back. Good information, really is. Time is money, you're right.
Time is money.
But time is more than that. Time is generations.
Yes.
Time is where we find knowledge that we really trust. And, we were having this conversation the other day, and just to kind of set the background of it, there was a conversation that was going on online again about the $15 an hour minimum wage. And I'm not an economist, so people get where my position comes from. It's just simply this. I'm not an economist. I understand generally some stuff in the economy, generally some stuff in finance, some stuff in marketing. I mean, that's my background, is finance, markets, and whatnot. So I get that. But I'm not an economist. And I for myself, not really knowing where to stand on this, I started looking, like, give me some information. And I didn't have time to go and read 15 different books. But what I did is I started looking at different people and how they arrived at their conclusion. And I thought, let me see how they arrive at their conclusion. Let me get a little bit about their life. Let me try to, as a large scope, since I can't really live the life of an economist, and I really cannot sit there and say, this is how it works. Let me try to do some research. So Walter Williams was kind of like the guy that I ended up going, like, I like his story. I think his story on how he got to his place speaks to me. So here's a guy that grew up kind of in these projects like you're talking about. And he was determined. He's like, you know what? Nobody's ever going to tell me no, that I can't, something like this. He just was stubborn enough to believe that he could do whatever he wanted. And nobody was going to tell him other than what he thought. And if somebody did, well, he'd challenge them, and he'd go and prove them wrong. Or he'd learn that maybe they were right, and he'd come around to their way of thinking. So Walter has a story where he goes, he gets in the Marines, and yet he goes into college. And very, very kind of liberal view of the economy, very much probably even toward the socialist slant in many ways. And he gets to his school, and he starts studying, and he goes into economics, and a teacher at one point says, like, well, you've got an opinion on that. And he's like, why don't you prove it to me? And Walter's thing was, that minimum wage is valuable, da-da-da-da. And he says, why don't you prove it to me? And Walter came out and did his entire doctorate on the economy and minimum wage, and sat there and said, it's the most damaging thing to our economy for the poor. And I'm sitting here going, he wants to protect the same people you want to protect. He followed the same path in life, dedicated himself to understanding it. Now, I don't have the opportunity to sit with him and learn from him like I can learn from you. But his story, his path, and just his chosen study said that the minimum wage was the most racist thing ever invented in our economy. And I find that I'm like, here's a guy that I would not normally sit there and, hey, I know anything about this. But his story tells me his analysis is worth understanding. So I started reading some of his books, and I started trying to get an understanding of it. Again, do I have all the answers? Absolutely not. This is not about the minimum wage conversation. It's about how you come about with the knowledge that you're willing to say, this is how I'm going to live my life. I'm going to take this knowledge and say, I'm going to move forward assuming that this knowledge is valid.
Here are the assumptions that I'm making in life, and these are the things I'm going to live by. These are my beliefs, and this is how I back it up. And I would say a couple of things, because I'm glad we had that conversation the other day, because it helped me understand what you were trying to get to. And in the end, I gave you what I really believed. Remember about the empire thing?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is on some level, not.
And we should get back to that.
And we will talk about that, because it's going to be part of my response to all of this.
Yep.
Because it's to me it's spiritual, not in a religious sense, but it's spiritual. But as far as what he had done, I will say this: having gone to graduate school and having been in a doctoral program, for every study that proves a position, there's another project that disproves that position. Number one.
Yep.
Number two, the mechanics of going through graduate school, particularly on a doctoral level. One of my co-workers, who's an anthropologist and has an MPH, Master's in Public Health, when I was telling her about my working on my doctorate in education, she said, well, the first thing they do is break your spirit, because they want you to think, all of you to think the same way.
Yes.
And one of the things that was most frustrating for me in graduate school, my official degree way back when was an MBA in accounting. So it's very different. There's no philosophical, it's like math.
Right. It's
either it is or it isn't.
Right. It's black, white, red.
We didn't write papers.
Okay. Right.
We didn't write papers. But as I'm working my way through cultural studies and Spanish and all these things, and I'm beginning to write these papers and beginning to get the standards by which I'm supposed to write, I had to give up, number one, a certain number of my beliefs. I mean, I don't mean that I gave them up,
right.
but I was not given the freedom to write that. And I had to write in a very specific way, using very specific language. So you could read 5 papers and they all sounded the same.
And real quick, and this is a slight tangent, but I really want people to start hearing what it is you're saying, because I've just started seeing what you're saying. I've just started really getting the whole idea that and this sounds horrid, but to earn your doctorate, your job is to prove somebody else right.
Well,
essentially,
it's
like somebody else has gone in this direction,
right?
And the team, what's the board? The board that you're actually the committee, right? Are all people who generally have a great understanding of a particular field and believe similarly about that field and the direction of that field,
right?
And the people that they then call doctor, and they're your teachers,
right?
Right. So they must shape your opinion,
and you're regurgitating,
into your own language, possibly, but that's really the point I'm making. You're not even regurgitating into your own language. You learn a certain way of speaking. You learn a certain way of writing, yes.
And everyone is speaking and writing in that same way. And now, that to me, that was the downside. What I was getting out of it was the wealth of books I was getting to read.
Okay.
And so
sure.
my position on graduate level education is, if you want me to prove to you that I've learned from this vast, library of material, allow me to express that. And I trust you. Trust me, you will understand that I got it.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute you put me in this box and say, you have to regurgitate it in this way, then you spend all your time trying to ivory tower speak.
Yes.
You know, I'm in film studies, and they tell me when we have to break. But there's students sitting there just regurgitating things that we were reading, and I was the adult student, older student, and I couldn't help but ask sometimes, do you even go to the movies? Do you even like movies?
Are you even a part of
You're
that?
just regurgitating what you read in that book, but you're not really internalizing. You're not really absorbing these things. And so I you know, like I said, the thing that I got out of it was the knowledge. The knowledge came from just the huge volumes of books that we were required to read.
So let's come back. Let's take a break and we'll come back. Let's talk about knowledge and really what it means to have knowledge without application.
Right. Exactly.
1 minute.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just do it 1 minute.
It's just like at U of R, in the Med Center. Do you know how many studies or research studies are done every year, funded by grants?
Okay. And we'll be back, and we're back. So, yeah, so we just left, and we started out because we're really looking for the whole idea of how to find who your trusted source is, what your trusted source is. But the idea is to know your trusted source, and how do you know when to trust it, if you will. And we went into the whole idea of domicile with the idea of where people are literally, as you said, murdering people's homes. And if you missed it, go back, you'll understand it. Then we got into the gentrification, where people are nicely coming in to fix up your neighborhood and kick you out so you're not living in your home. So they're cutting off roots, and we're constantly cutting off roots, and we're constantly cutting off roots. Then we went into a conversation about even once you start getting a lot of knowledge, that through the education process, that they want you to start talking like they're talking like you're talking. So at one end, we looked at the poverty-stricken and said that we cut their roots off. And on the other, we went and said all the way to the doctorates who are pursuing their education, and we cut their tongue off.
Right.
Right.
Spirit.
Right. So right. We take their spirit from them. And I think that what we found is people who are really almost idolizing knowledge, but don't necessarily have the application in their own life to realize the result of it. But so before we went to break, we were talking about the application of knowledge and why that's important.
And I'm a strong believer in knowledge as opposed to, I think there's a slight distinction between education and knowledge.
Absolutely.
So my purpose for going to graduate school at that point in my life was not actually to earn degrees, but to gain knowledge.
Yes.
And it gave me access to knowledge. It gave me access to conversations on a certain level that I was then going to take. For example, by getting a doctorate in education, my goal was really to become an advocate for my grandchildren.
There you go.
That's why I was doing that. I wasn't so much concerned about having an EDD. I wanted the knowledge of how educational systems work and all of that. So when I sat in the room as an advocate for my grandchildren, I could speak the same language. And I'm not talking about papers.
Right.
But having the conversation.
Have the right conversation.
And so that, as you say, I'm not relying on the principal or the teacher as the trusted source.
And I think we have to have trusted sources because we can't experience everything.
Right.
But then we do have to take our own experiences and apply them. And then there's even this whole thing which gets into sort of like, and you're saying the spirit side. Mm-hmm. And again, we're not talking religious, but there's a time where you have to kind of discern something you don't know because you don't have the experience, but you have experience in something over here and knowledge now. And in between, there's this big gap, and you have to kind of be able to discern.
Well, and that's the critical thinking aspect of it. You have the ability.
Yep.
We gain the ability. That is one of the things that education gives us. Whether my mother was an autodidact. That's a person who's self-educated.
Okay.
Okay. She can hold a conversation about anything with anyone on any level because she was an avid reader. She researched. She loved history. And so I learned many things from her. Okay? So I think that knowledge gets you into the game and gives you the ability to see through what's real and what may not be real. Because one of the things she always said to me, yeah, you need to read everything. But when you're reading, you need to question everything that you're reading.
And I like that right there because the knowledge, without questioning the knowledge, doesn't perfect the knowledge.
Right.
You know, and that's what I think we see so often right now is a whole bunch of people who have facts, I use that term loosely, headlines that go on Facebook, and now that's my life.
It's real.
It's real. That headline in this moment makes me feel like that's the right thing to do for the whole world, and if I agree with it, then I'll be liked by this group of people, and I tend to like that group of people more than I like that group of people. So this headline is now what I'm staking, my life on.
Right.
I unfriend you.
I unfriend you. I unfriend you.
But so for you, obviously, like your mother, it's easy to look and say, she was a trusted source, and pretty much nothing.
She was a trusted source, as well as being a trusted source. She was a teacher, and so it wasn't that she was lecturing me in that sense. We were reading these books together. We were watching shows at that time together, where she was talking about, you see that person, this is what they're saying here. She was helping me understand the world around me, which I think is very, very important. And she had a child who had a thirst for knowledge.
Which it's almost that she also gave you that thirst.
Yes, she did.
And that might be a good way of knowing, if you will, knowing your trusted source.
Right.
Who is it in your life that you have a thirst for something that they offer? Is there an insatiable hunger, if you will? Not insatiable, that's the wrong word.
But it actually is. I mean, I'm a person who is a lifelong learner, and the best way to define that is that I am a person who craves that, who just stopping is almost impossible for me. I have to do something. When I couldn't do formal education anymore, well, then I started taking piano lessons. I have to, because you're just learning.
And if the craving, if you will, is pursuing your own headline, right? I mean, it's never really a real source. It's actually got to be something driven by yourself, and yours is knowledge, experience, wanderer. I mean, that's, and it's got to be real, and you kind of found that. And I think that's something we need to be thinking about right now in society. I think we really need to. Who are we trusting? Like, who are the and why are we trusting them? And I think
no one.
What's that? Right. Trust no one, son. Not even me. I saw that in shoot. What movie was that? It was just the other night. It was
I know. I saw that too.
What was that?
I don't remember what it was, but I do
trust
remember that.
no one, son.
Not even me.
Not even me. And I'm like, what a wonderful thing for a child to
I will
hear.
tell you. I will tell you
That
this.
was on Monday night in our thing. It was the
history things.
Rockefellers.
The Rockefeller's son. Yes. So it was actually Rockefeller's father was a con man. And
No.
a snake. No, you've got to go watch the series. You've got to go watch The Men Who Built America. It's great storytelling. It really is. It gives you some ideas of what happens when capitalism goes wrong, the social impact that goes with them. You get to see Rockefeller's change, right?
You don't think that I had long storytelling sessions with my mother about the Rockefellers and the Kennedys?
I think that would be cool.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the person that I.
I think you'd enjoy
with, you know?
I think you'd enjoy the way the History Channel put it together. But anyways, so that was it. His father was this kind of snake oil salesman, and then he became an oil salesman. Which is kind of it's not snake oil. It actually was beneficial to the entire industry. But that was the scene. In one of the scenes, his father says, "Trust nobody, son, not even me." And I remember thinking about that. I'm like, boy, what are we doing to our children when we're telling them, trust no one, not even me? And to some degree, it's like, you know what? Really, don't trust me because I'm going to let you down too. I'm just a human. But, boy, our children have to be able to trust that we care, that we have their best in mind. You know, it's like anything I ever tell you is going to be for your good.
We all have to have a safe place.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not your parent.
No.
Sometimes it's your grandparents. Sometimes it's an uncle. Sometimes it's kind of like Tag was saying about his guest that he had.
Yep.
How important he was in his life.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that safe
absolutely.
that safe place could come anywhere. But I was going to make one comment about the Ivory Tower.
Okay.
And what I will say, I've been in the Ivory Tower, and I have to tell you, it's a lot of fun.
The Ivory Tower is a lot of fun.
It is really a lot of fun if you're a nerd. I mean, it's really. I worked. It was an organization, a pharmaceutical company I worked for, and I worked in their accounting think tank, and it was one of the best jobs I had because all I had to do was read and write all day.
That's cool.
Now.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of work to do, and it was driving me crazy, but I can understand those people who spend their lives just in that tower,
Yes.
reading this stuff and just spilling all this information out.
But again,
Just want that cup of coffee.
Yeah, and again, exactly. You just want the cup of, and ultimately, you're still limited to the books in that tower.
Exactly.
To the voices in that tower. So let's take a break. When we come back, let's talk about maybe how people can find their own voice. Because I think that honestly is another thing. Once you start hearing yourself speak in your own voice, once you feel good about
It frees you.
You know, it frees you.
And I experienced that, and so, yeah.
Yeah, so, well, let's take a 2-minute break. We did that. And I'm going to grab a drink or something, and we'll go from there. Okay. Here we have Is the mic out? Okay, so we're back. We're back. So we've gone through a whole bunch of stuff. Kind of come back here. Somebody finding their own voice. You said you had that experience in your life.
Yes. I think it is really, I always use the metaphor for myself that up until a certain age I felt like I was in the bottom of a well and no one could hear me. And there was just so much to be said, but I never had the opportunity to say it. And I'm going to go back to graduate school to give you an example. Okay. I was taking, at that time I was doing Spanish. And I was doing the class on Spanish film. So all during the semester we were writing papers. I was getting A's, A pluses, and the professor kept telling me, I just love the way you write, I love the way you write, I love the way you write. When it came time for the final paper, he said to us, he gave us 3 pages of instructions. Okay? It's got to be an MLA format. Make sure you're not doing this. Make sure you're doing that. And when he gave the paper back to me, he said, I could not believe the same person wrote those papers. He said, you were writing these incredible papers, and then you get to the final paper, and I'm just wading through this stuff, and I can't believe. And I said to him, it's because you made me take my voice.
Because you
took my voice. When I was writing before, you weren't giving me any instructions. You told me, write what I felt about this. And I did. But for the final paper, you told me I had to have footnotes, and I had to do this, and I had to make sure it wasn't plagiarizing. I had to do this. So there was no thinking about, no freedom of thought, no freedom of expression. There was only these guidelines and this cage that you wanted to put me in, which took my voice away.
Yep.
But everyone has to find, because once you find your voice, and I think a lot of it is about letting go.
I think so.
It's about letting go.
Yeah, I can understand that. Because while you're talking, I was here thinking, I'm like, okay, do we always speak in our own voice? And I was here going, no, because I prefer to write. And I prefer to make things a little bit more story-like, a little bit more fun, like I was doing today on Facebook. I prefer that. But most people get so confused by that I can't do that. So I have to come to an instructional, directional. It depends kind of at the role that you're doing at a given time of the day, the language that you have to use. And that's okay. But you're right. There's a time, if there was the opportunity of letting go everything, but the one thing that let you speak in the voice that you felt best represented you, there's freedom.
Right. Not only is there freedom, but I think that it's rewarding not just for you, but for the audience.
Yes.
You take that away, then the audience is not really hearing something that's sincere, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I absolutely.
It's filtered through a very, very structured process, which then makes it bland. And
that's, if you will, trying to set people free to explore their own voice, right? There's I don't know what you want to call it, a balance that each person has to find between, I'm going to explore my own voice, and I'm just going to have a voice, right? Which are the people who are going to grab that headline and join the crowd and chant and say, I have a voice because this feels like and sounds like the right thing to do right now. And in that moment, perhaps you've lost your own voice.
And I don't actually think that's a voice. What I think that is ego.
That's exactly, I think that's ego. And because I was about to flip it around, right? Because at the same time, we could be in cadence.
Right.
We could be shouting the same thing.
Right.
We could have the same word, but then suddenly we're in step. We have the same heart.
Right.
We have the same spirit. And though our words are the same, and we may be using the same inflections, it's still our voice.
Right. Exactly.
And that is a thing that I wish people, I hope people can understand that, because there's such a power in saying you and I can speak as the same words and know that it means something different to both of us.
Right.
But in us delivering on those same words, we're both made more whole.
But you know, we have to understand, and we often talk about that process of losing your voice starts when we put our kids in school.
Yes, it does.
Because what's the first thing we do with children when we put them in school? We want them to sit down and be quiet and all be the same.
Yeah.
So that process starts as soon as, you know, we from the beginning, because up to that point, you know, mommy and daddy, oh, look what he's doing, oh my, you know. But then we put them in schools and no, you can't do that, you can't shout out, no.
You can't, you must conform, and we all must conform. There's even a conforming to yourself.
Right.
That's the one thing people, like conformity, discipline, all of those things are good, but they still have to conform to your own self.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things my mother used to say. As soon as you hit school, they want you to be a pea in a pod.
Yep. And
so
great,
you're taking that spirit away. You're taking that. You at that point are already squashing that voice. So to get your voice,
I 100% agree. I just kind of like the pea in the pod because I believe that community. There's a part of me that says everybody has to be a part of community in order to find their true voice. So the pea in the pod to me is like the three people that we should be together with. I hear you.
Yeah, so we want everyone to conform. So to find your voice and as an adult is really recapturing something that was taken away, as opposed to newly discovering something. It was there from the beginning. Your freedom of thought, your expressing. I mean, that's one of the things that's was freeing for me, having a brain injury. All kidding aside, because I lost my inhibitions.
And you probably,
I lost my inhibitions, and by losing my inhibitions, I'm sitting up here now, I say what I want to say, and people ask me, well, what is it like? I said, it's like being a toddler.
You know, and that's, if there's something to that, right, if you will, going right back to the beginning, we'll go here and take a break in a minute, we'll come and close up, but going right back to the beginning, it's like being a toddler. It's like coming full circle, going all the way back to that safe place that you felt when you were a toddler.
With the knowledge
when you're
I have
Kevin,
now.
like 9 years old, creating, you know, the ninjas.
Right.
And today, here he is, however old he is, and 9 years old is his voice.
Well,
right?
You know, that is such an incredible example because, I mean, as a very young child, I told my mother I wanted to be an artist.
Yep.
I didn't know what kind of artist. It has evolved and gone through different stages and different art forms. But I knew I wanted to be an artist. And so you're right when you talk about full circle, because I've even thought of things as, well, you know, my mother bought a piano when I was taking piano lessons. Oh my God, mommy. And what did I do? I took piano lessons in my 50s, and I loved it.
Right.
You know, so it was a coming full circle. It's
good. So let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back, and we'll just kind of wrap up a little bit. And
okay.
We can go to break, and you're not opening up.
I don't know what that means.
Don't worry anything. Just say what I say, as I say it in the same dialect. Are you ready?
And just
Yeah.
say, okay.
Just nod and agree with me, all right? And we're all good. As long as you say what I say, we're good. All right. So we're coming to the close on Verbum tonight, where we're looking at really trusted relationships. And I know for many of you might have, if you're watching, you kind of like, okay, where did that come from? But really, I think the whole idea is just stop parroting a bunch of people. You know, this whole thing that we went through in the country of everybody's an individual. Okay, no kidding. But you know what? You don't actually have to step up and just be the loudest, obnoxious person because a headline comes across that then puts you part of a group that says, like, hooray for our side, right? I mean, we're back to the 60s and that kind of thing. Like, hooray for our side. And what was the name of the, all the church bells were broken is the night of tonight's, is the name of tonight's episodes. Because that's kind of what it is. It's like a whole bunch of gongs going on right now in the world. A whole bunch of just like bells that are ringing that aren't really ringing the way they're supposed to be ringing.
And we didn't talk about it, but you know my take on it.
We didn't get to it.
I know.
Empire building. You should have brought it back to empire building, but we kind of went in a different direction.
Yeah,
but we can talk about empire building another time. But really, your trusted sources. Question why you trust what you trust. You know, find what is true, because there is truth. You know, people who say there's no truth, it's like the whole concept. For something to be true, it must be true to itself, so there is truth. Find it.
What is the movie about the galaxy? Do you know the movie, do you know, Tim, about the galaxy? They made it was a book, and then they made a movie, and then the crowd at the end, they all were waiting for this person to give the answer. Like, what is the answer to the question?
It was like,
and they were just like so worked up. And then the person turned around and said, 20.
20.
And no one knew
20.
what that 20. No one had
what I've seen, and I think it might have been Julio who shared it, and it's something that it was Pat, a friend over. He shared the quote by Socrates. It's something like, the wisest know that they know nothing.
Right.
Just leave it with that. The wisest know that they know nothing. The moment you think you know everything is the moment the rest of us know you know nothing.
Or in other words, 20.
20. 20. Have a good night.
It was something like, what's the secret to the galaxy?